Hey, welcome back to my channel, everybody. This is Dustin coming at you with another deck list. Um, so today, I wanted to discuss my High Perfect Morcant Elf deck list. As you know, High Perfect Morcant is one of the new creatures to come from Lore when Eclipsed. She was kind of one of the most sought after commanders everybody's been talking about since she came out or was kind of spoiled. I know once I saw her, I immediately sent all my friends, this is who I'm building. Look at her feet. Um, and yeah, so she finally was released. I actually pulled her in a pack that I opened. Um, and then I also got a copy from my game store, my local game store. Um, I didn't open her in the bundle pack that I opened, where I opened the that fracture foil. But anyway, so I have a copy of her. There'll probably be some more changes that will be made to this deck. This is, my first kind of throw it all together as I pull more cards from the set and I continue to see how this deck operates. But I figured it was a pretty good foundation to share with everybody at this point. So we'll get into it. Uh, Real quick, I did have somebody ask about my new playmat. So for those of you that are retro video game nerds, this is actually a generated picture of the Kingdom of Zeal from Chrono Trigger with Shala and Janice, or who ends up being Magus, for those of you, spoiler alert, that haven't played. Um, so I got this made actually on Amazon. I think it was like 25 bucks. You send them an image, they create it, mail it to you. It's the same thing I did with my Final Fantasy one, Final Fantasy 7 one, the mat that I had previously with Sephiroth and Cloud and the two Shinra soldiers from the remake or rebirth. I think actually it'd be rebirth. Um, so yeah, so pretty good deal. The only thing is, it is coming from like Japan, so it takes a solid 3 weeks for them to create it, then throw it in the mail, customs, da 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 da, get it here. It does take a little bit of time, but it's definitely worth it. I'm pretty stoked with it. It came out really good, um, and it's kind of, you can customize it and make it however you want. So, um, but we'll go ahead and get started here. So. High Perfect Morecamp. She reads as a 2 black and green for a legendary elf noble. She's a 4/4, so she got a thick body. um, Whenever High Perfect Morecamp or another elf you control blight enters, each opponent blights 1. So for those of you who are familiar with the new blight mechanic, blight says they each put a -1/-1 counter on a creature they control. So each opponent would choose which creature they would place the -1/-1 counter on. And then she also reads, tap 3 untapped elves you control to proliferate. You can only activate this as a sorcery, but still. The kind of the point of this deck is to dump a bunch of elves on the battlefield, um, give out poison counters, proliferate them with the different proliferate options we have. Um, Give your opponent's creatures -1/-1 counters, proliferate those to, clear their board. Quite a few different options to get rid of creatures, and then just swing large or, 10 poison counters and end the game. So we'll get started on the land base. So there are 33 lands in this deck. Again, it's a work in progress. Kind of just a basic land build right now. There's some, there's a shock land in here and stuff like that, but I don't know if maybe there's not enough mana, too much, whereas we do have several mana dorks in here. But still kind of working out the kinks. I've only played this once. Played it the other night, and I ended up scooping because the game was just taking too long, and me and my wife were going out to meet some friends. So, to start, we got 14 basic forests, 14 basic forests, and 8 swamps. Utility lands and duels, we have the new Abundant Countryside. So this is actually from one of the Lorwyn Eclipsed Commander decks. It taps for a colorless. You can tap it to add 1 color of any mana, spend to cast a creature spell, and you can tap 6 and tap it to create a 1/1 colorless shapeshifter creature token with channeling, or changeling, sorry. So all else fails in your turn, go ahead and make yourself a creature token. If you have any token doublers, now it's doubled. A lot of the creatures and things in this deck will give +1/+1 counters or +1/+1 static to your elves. So it can just make them stronger and stronger. Exotic Orchard. 3-Tree City, for those that aren't familiar with 3-Tree City, it reads, when it enters, choose a creature type. You can tap it to add a colorless, or you can tap 2 and tap it, choose a color, add an amount of mana of that color equal to the number of creatures you control of chosen type. So if you have a ton of elves on the board, obviously you're going to choose elves with this. You can tap 2, tap it, and you get a whatever color mana for each elf you control. So after any more than 3 elves, you'll net more mana. So Overgrown Tomb, Blooming Marsh, Eclipsed Realms, another new land from the set. So as this land enters, choose Elemental, Elf, Fairy, Giant, Goblin, Kithkin, Merfolk, or Treefolk. And then the same concept as the other land, it taps for a colorless, or you can tap to add 1 mana of any color, spend it to cast creatures of the chosen type or activate an ability of the chosen type. Command Tower, that's the double-sided Jurassic Park. I guess we'll do the Dino side. Karn's Bastion, so again, proliferate ability, so it taps for a colorless, or you can tap for and tap it to proliferate. Deathcap Glade, Undergrowth Stadium, and Path of Ancestry. Again, this is a primarily elf deck. I believe there are 29 of the 34 creatures are elves. So a lot of times you'll be able to take advantage of that scry ability with the Path of Ancestry. I was recording this last night, and then my wife woke up and was having anxiety or something. So I actually kind of redoing the video this morning. But one thing I noticed, I was kind of chatting, just to the camera with myself, and I recognized that, I kind of focus on a lot of decks that are, the typal or tribal style deck, between my Dragon deck that I built for my wife, which is primarily dragons, my zombie deck, which is actually every creature in it is a zombie creatures type, Nazgul, wraiths, and Kalia, which is angels, demons, and dragons. I seem to really focus on those decks, building those decks that are kind of primarily a creature type, so kind of like a tribal style deck. I don't know why, but I think 4 out of my 7 decks that I built are primarily one creature base. I'm not sure why that is. Muldrotha, obviously that's a bit different. That's a graveyard deck, so it's got a variety of creatures. Even if you look at my Nekusar deck, I think I have 8 or 9 wizards creature type in that deck, and let's see, that deck doesn't have a lot of creatures. I mean, it's got 19 creatures in my Nekusar deck. There's 19 creatures, and 9 of them, so half of them are wizard creature type. So almost all my decks kind of have this primary function of being, somewhat of a tribal deck. So I don't know why. I don't know what my next deck will be that I'll build, but yeah, I seem to lean towards those, those kind of tribal type decks. All right, so we will get started with the artifacts. So the Great Henge, or the Banyan Tree, 7 green for a legendary artifact. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. With the amount of +1/+1 counters that can be given, the static elf +1s that are given for just controlling the creature. This can greatly be reduced in cost. You can tap it to add 2 green, gain 2 life, and then whenever a non-token creature you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on it and draw a card. Again, there are several +1/+1 counter doublers, or add additional +1/+1 counters to the creatures. So putting the +1/+1 on and drawing a card, it's pretty nice. Obviously, we got our Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and the Earth Crystal. So the Earth Crystal, 2 and green for a legendary artifact. Green spells cost 1 less to cast. That's always helpful. However, if 1 or more +1/+1 counters will be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. Very nice. And then you can tap 4 green and tap the Earth Crystal to distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 creatures you control. Again, you put those +1/+1 counters on, Earth Crystal will double them, and now your creature went from being possibly a 5/5 to a 9/9 or something. If it was a 1/1 originally, and +2/+2, and the tokens just can get going wild. And then the Contagion Engine. So this is a 6-drop for an artifact. When it enters, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature a target player controls. So they'll love you for that. And then you can tap 4 and tap it to proliferate twice. So again, as we were saying with the elf, High Perfect Morcant's ability, tap 3 elves to proliferate. Now you have something that will proliferate twice. So you give an opponent all their creatures -1/-1 counters, tap 3 elves, proliferate those, tap 4 and tap the artifact to proliferate twice. Now all of a sudden their creatures are down -4, and their board's wiped or something. Their creatures are all gone. So some nasty synergies. What's great about the -1/-1 counters as well is that it gets around indestructible and hexproof, because all the creatures are getting blighted, all the creatures are getting the -1/-1 counters, and you're just proliferating them, and it gets around, the indestructible ability. So we'll move on next. Let's see. So scoop up no, those are creatures. That goes there. Let's check out our sorceries. What are these? Enchantments. We'll go to enchantments next. Sylvan Library, 1 and a green. So the wording on this is a little wonky. This is an older card, so you may draw 2 extra cards during your draw phase. If you do so, put 2 of the cards drawn this turn back on top of your library in any order, or pay 4 life per card not replaced. Effects to prevent, so you can't redirect that damage or counter it. But basically, it's potential for a draw engine. Let's see. Terra Symbiosis, 2 and a green. Whenever you put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, you may draw that many cards. Do this only once per turn. So again, if you're creating +1/+1 counter, you're proliferating it to add a couple more, or it's being doubled, you can then draw that many cards per turn. Elven Chorus, 3 and a green. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast creature spells from the top, and creatures you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color. Branching Evolution, 2 and a green for an enchantment. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many are put on that creature instead. So some more counter doublers. Primal Vigor, 4 and a green. If 1 or more tokens would be created, twice that many are created instead. And if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature, twice that many are put on the creature instead. We get another one, Doubling Season. Same concept, just different verbiage. For Doubling Season, except this will double any counters put on. So if you were to put on counters on, I'm trying to think. This would work with like Gemstone Mine. If you were to put a counter on a Gemstone Mine, at the beginning of turn, it puts, when it enters the battlefield, it has 3 mining counters. My understanding is it would double and it would have 6 mining counters on it for it entering. So again, I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me. I'm still learning how to play this damn game, but that would also be oil counters on Phyrexians or something like that. Prowess of the Fair, 1 in the black for a tribal elf enchantment. Whenever another elf token is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you may create a 1/1 elf warrior creature token. I'll save that one for later. Necrogen Communion for 1 in the black. It's an aura enchantment to enchant creature. Enchanted creature has Toxic 2. So again, one of the win conditions or way to win with this deck would be to give your opponents poison counters, and then, you know, proliferate the hell out of those, put them in a situation where, you know, they die due to poison counters. One great thing about Necrogen Communion, when enchanted creature dies, return that card to the battlefield under your control. So that's kind of neat. And then lastly, or no, I got 2 more. Beastmaster Ascension. So another way to, you know, win the game is make your creatures big and swing big. So Beastmaster Ascension, 2 and a green. Whenever a creature you control attacks, you may put a quest counter on this enchantment. As long as this enchantment has 7 or more quest counters on it, creatures you control get +5/+5. So the quest counters would work with Doubling Season. I don't think I have any other token or counter doublers, but this with Doubling Season would work. So if you attack with 4 creatures, you put 4 quest counters on it. If an effect would put 1 or more counters on a permanent you control, twice that counters gets put on. That would go from 4 to 8. Now you get the +5/+5. And then lastly, Flourishing Defenses. This I think will sync or will you know, synchronize and synergize with High Perfect Morcant wonderfully. It basically can drain the board to clean out the board of creatures. So Flourishing Defenses reads, it's 4 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a -1/-1 counter is placed on a creature, you may put a 1/1 elf warrior creature token into play. Morcant Blights. Each opponent puts a -1/-1 counter on. You create an elf token. Triggers Morcant again. Opponent's Blight. -1/-1 counters are put. More elves control. Basically until the board is empty. And now you have a ton of elves. And from my understanding of the synergy between these, this would not lock the game, because once the opponents do not have any creatures to blight, that will end the loop. So once their board is wiped out, you create all your elf tokens. Because there's nothing left for the blight to target, her trigger would stop. Then you could continue on with the game. Then the next time an elf would enter, let's say they have some creatures on the battlefield, you enter another elf, you go through that cycle again until the board is dry, until the creatures are gone. So disgusting. I'll be curious to see if I'll ever be able to pull it off in a game. I would imagine that the moment somebody hears that being cast, it's probably going to put a huge trigger or a huge target on me, but fun little synergy there. And again, like I said, you know, I wanted to get this out because I know a lot of people are looking to build Morcant and take advantage of some of the new elves that are being released with Lorwyn. So there'll be some changes. I can see cards in here already that just going through this again, I might, you know, swap out, you know, like Dread Return, 2 black for a sorcery to return target creature from graveyard to the battlefield. It has flashback, sack 3 creatures. You know, could be a way to recur some of the big elves. Again, kind of get to see how this deck plays out against other opponents. You know, you can goldfish this so much on Mox Field, and you're not going to get the real deal until you actually play it. Unnatural Restoration for 1 and a green. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand and proliferate. Feed the Swarm, 1 in the black, some removal. Destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. Tristane's Command, 4 black and a green for a Kindred Elf sorcery. You cast it, you choose 2. You can either create a token that's a copy of target elf you control, return 1 or 2 target permanents from your graveyard to your hand, destroy target creature or enchantment, and/or creatures target player controls get +3/+3 until end of turn and untap them. So a lot of different uses for this. Somebody's got a pesky creature or an enchantment you want to get rid of, you can do that, and then just make a copy of one of your elves or return some permanents from your graveyard that got destroyed. Or make your creatures huge. Tap your creatures to utilize them as mana dorks. Cast this, give them +3/+3, and untap them, and now you can attack with them. Or use tap your creatures to proliferate some of the counters on your opponent. Cast this before your combat phase and untap them all. Flare of Cultivation, so some ramp, 1 green, or you can alternative casting cost to sack a non-token green creature and search your library for up to 2 basic lands. Reveal those cards, put 1 on the battlefield tapped, 1 into your hand and shuffle. Exsanguinate, again with the amount of mana dorks, there are several mana dorks in here. Some of the ramp, you could easily drain your table or drain the table of several, 10, 15, 20 life with Exsanguinate and, get yourself some life back up in case, let's say you're getting low on life. This could easily be a quick way to finish off a game if needed. Kindred Dominance, 5 black, choose a creature type, destroy all creatures that aren't the chosen type. Obviously you would choose elves. Mop up the floor. Demonic Tutor, 1 in the black, search your library for a card, put it in your hand and shuffle. And Triumph of the Hordes, 2 green for a sorcery. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain Trample and Infect. So another way that you can potentially finish the game off, let's say you get a big board, you looking to really polish the game, you want to make sure, cast Triumph of the Horde, give all your creatures Trample, Infect, and +1/+1, and then turn them sideways and swing away. All right, next we will move on to the instants. All right, instants, we got Obscuring Haze, 2 and a green, or alternative casting cost. If you control a commander, you don't pay the mana cost. Prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponent controls. Again, see what level of value that will be after playing it a few times. Obviously, Obscuring Haze is great if you're playing against other decks that like to swing bigly. But we'll see. It's in here. It's in a free cast, so it may be of some value. Noxious Revival, put target card from a graveyard on top of its owner's library. Heroic Intervention, permanents you control gain hexproof indestructible until end of turn. So 1 in the green. So let's say you swing big, somebody tries to destroy all your creatures, or they're trying to destroy your board. Cast Heroic Intervention, give your creatures indestructible. Second Harvest, 2 green for an instant. For each token you control, create a token that's a copy of that permanent. Make some more tokens for the tokens you already have, and then let's say you have a token doubler on the board. Now you double those. So some good synergy there. Imp's Mischief, 1 in the black, basically is a deflecting swap for black. Change the target of target spell with a single target. Lose life equal to that spell's mana value. Infernal Grasp, 1 in the black, destroy target creature, you lose 2 life. Galdraheem Ambush, 3 and a green. Create X 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens, where X is the number of attacking creatures. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by non-elf creatures. So again, some protection, get you some tokens. Say you get a token doubler on the board, now you double those. Making elves. Elven Ambush, for 3 and a green, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token for each elf you control. And then our Worldly Tutor, go fetch yourself a creature, put them on your on top, or reveal it and put it on top and shuffle. So big stack of this now would be our creatures. So if I remember correctly, there's 9 instants, 9 sorceries. I think we only have 5 artifacts and 10 enchantments, 33 lands. The bulk of this deck would be creatures at 34 creatures, or 33 creatures. And then High Perfect Morcant, 34 total. So 33 within the 99. I think that math works. mana box says it does. So so this deck does have an average casting cost right around 3. So again, it's a little bit high, but we have things, you know, we have big casting things like the Banyan Tree, which can be cost reduced, Contagion Engine, which is huge, proliferating twice. That can be gross. Flourishing Defenses, which is a 5-drop, you know, doubling Season Primal Vigor. So some of these are relatively expensive casting items, but not only do we have a few mana rocks, but we also have several mana dorks and the ability to turn some of our creatures into mana dorks with, you know, the Elven Chorus. And then we have some things in here like, you know, Marwyn the Nurturer. What was the other one that's in here? Circle of the Dreams Druid, you know, Deathbloom Gardener, Heritage Druid. So we have several mana dorks that also you can utilize to create more mana on top of, you know, however many elves you have, you can tap for with like 3 Tree City. So I think the 3 casting costs with some of the larger things, I think the way you can tap things like 3 Tree City and some of these mana dorks, I don't think you'll see the cost of certain things really interfering if you're able to get a board state, you know, build your board state quickly, create a bunch of elves. You know, even with Elven Chorus, that turns all those mana dorks into elves as well. So I haven't, like I said, I haven't played this deck yet. I'm planning on going down to my local LGS today to play a few rounds if I have time this afternoon. So, you know, today is my birthday, turning 39 today. So, you know, I figured I would treat myself to a nice little day off, and might go play a couple games down at my LGS. So anyway, so Eldamiri, Lord of Leaves. I think this is like one of my first, if my first, or I think this is my first reserve list card. Eldamiri, Lord of Leaves, for a 2/2 legend for green, all elves gain Forest Walk, and elves cannot be the target of spells or abilities. So some protection for your elves, gives them Forest Walk, which can make them unblockable if you're playing anybody that has green or has forest on the board. You know, that can be a problem very quickly, especially if they have Infect or they're huge and building up your elves. You swing somebody and they can't block, you know, that can end the game right there. Next up, we have Marwyn the Nurturer, as I was saying. 2 mana green for an elf, legendary elf druid. Whenever another elf enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Marwyn the Nurturer, and you can tap to add green equal to Marwyn's power. Again, that can get big very fast. If you're making, you know, elves, or you're dumping a bunch of elves on the board, and now Marwyn's got, you know, 6 +1/+1 counters, and then you have a token, or you have a counter doubler, which is doubling those +1/+1 counters. Now you can tap her for 12. You know, that's gross. Wolverine Riders, 4 green for an elf warrior, 4/4. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Whenever an elf enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to its toughness. This is kind of on my list of potential cuts. It's a slow card. It's a 6. You don't see any benefit to creating the elves until your next upkeep. And at that point, you know, casting something for 6, you would hope it's going to really accelerate your win condition. But I'm going to keep it for now. I'm not playing aggressive CEDH Magic. So I think I'll still see some value in it. Llanowar Elves for green mana dork, Gyre Sage, 1 in the green for a 1/2 elf druid with Evolve. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. A lot of our elves potentially do, and then you can tap the Gyre Sage to add green to your mana pool for each +1/+1 counter. So you just keep putting +1/+1 counters on her again, and tap her for that many. Dawnhand Dissonant, for a black 1/2 elf warlock, you can tap it to blight 1, so that would be blighting your own creatures, to surveil 1, or you can tap 2 to blight 2, which means put 2 -1/-1 counters on 1 or 2 creatures you control, to exile a card from the graveyard. And that states during your turn, you may cast creature spells from among the cards you exiled with this creature by removing 3 counters from among creatures you control, in addition to paying its other mana costs. So you can put those -1/-1 counters on your creatures, exile a creature or a target card from your graveyard. You can cast the creatures by removing 3 of those. So you could remove those blights from your creatures and then pay its mana cost from exile to play it. Again, I haven't used this yet to, what it's supposed to do with blight. I think I used it the other night just to surveil, so I could see, because I was getting land flooded hardcore. So I used it to surveil, but I did not use its blight 2 ability yet to exile target card from graveyard. Essence Warden, green 1/1 elf. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. So another creature, so any creatures from the board enter, you gain a life. Dwynen's Elite, I don't know how to pronounce that. Dwynen's Elite, 1 in the green for an elf warrior, 2/2. Whenever this creature enters, if you control another elf, create a 1/1 elf warrior creature token. Deathrite Shaman can be cast for either a black or a green, a 1/2 elf shaman. Tap it to exile target land from a graveyard, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Tap a black and tap it to exile instant or sorcery from the graveyard. Each opponent loses 2 life. Or you can tap a green and tap it to exile target creature card from a graveyard and gain 2 life. Again, this doesn't say your graveyard. This can be any graveyard. You get an opponent who you're worried is going to reanimate a big dog creature, tap a green and tap it and exile that card from a graveyard and gain 2 life, and then you don't have to deal with that threat anymore. All right, Numa, Joraga Chieftain, for 2 and a green for a legendary elf warrior. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay XX. When you do, distribute X +1/+1 counters among target elves. Any number of target elves, so you can choose however many +1/+1 you want to go on target elves. It also has partner, but we're not using it for that. Realm Walker, 2 and a green for a 2/3 shapeshifter changeling. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. You can look at the top card of your library at any time, and you can cast creature spells of the chosen type from the top of your library. Dwynen Gilt Leaf Dane. Again, if I butcher the pronunciations to these guys, I'm sorry. I'm trying. So it is a 2 green for a 3/4 legendary elf warrior with reach. Other elf creatures you control get +1/+1, and when it attacks, you gain 1 life for each attacking elf you control. I mentioned earlier, Circle the Dreams Druid for green for a 2/1 elf druid. You can tap it to add green for each creature you control. So again, you got 8 elf warrior creature tokens on the board. Tap Circles of the Dream Druid. Oh, look at that. Now you get 1 for each creature on the board, including your token creatures, because it doesn't specify. Quick ramp. Lathril, Blade of the Elves, 2 black-green. I know a lot of people were, are looking at potentially swapping out their, Morcant, or taking Lathril out and putting him in the 99 and using Morcant. So Lathril reads as a 2/3 legendary elf noble with menace. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you create that many 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. And then you can tap 10 untapped elves you control. Each opponent loses 10 life and you gain 10 life. So if we're pumping out a ton of creature tokens, which again, you got token doublers in here that you can make more and more and more. Next thing you know, you're tapping them for 10 and draining the table for 10, and gaining, and it's each opponent, not just target opponent. Each opponent loses 10 life. You do that in 4 turns. Somebody doesn't deal with you by the point you're getting him out. I'm sure somebody's already been dealt some combat damage. If your board is big, that's basically putting a timer is on. You need to deal with this threat. Poison Tip Archer, 2 black and a green for a 2/3 elf archer with reach and death touch. Whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Again, whenever another creature, so not anything you control, a creature in general dies, your table is going to lose 1 life. So sorry, my cat came barging in here. So each opponent loses 1 life, not just target opponent, each opponent. So next up we have Morcant's Loyalist. So this is a new card. So Morcant's Loyalist, 1 black and a green for a 3/2 elf warrior. Other elves you control get +1/+1 when this creature dies, and return another target elf card from your graveyard to your hand. Pretty nice, 3-drop for a 3/2 body, gives your other elves +1/+1, and also gives you some recursion if it dies. You can return target elf card from your graveyard to your hand. Deathbloom Gardener, 2 and a green for a 1/1 elf druid mana dork that also has death touch. That's nice. So let's say you need to chunk block, you need to block and you got a 1/1 death touch elf. That's going to really make your opponents think twice about attacking, and again, there are elves in here that are going to buff up, your elves. So a 1/1 elf with death touch could turn into a 4/4 elf with death touch pretty quickly. And if you're using +1/+1 counters to put on those creatures, now they're doubling if you have counter doublers out there. Plague Nurse, 3 and a green for a Phyrexian Clerk, 3/4 with Toxic 2. One of the reasons I put her in here is the 2 and a green ability to give each other creature you control with toxic, or each other creature you control with toxic gains toxic 1 until end of turn. You can activate this only once each turn. Elvish Champion for, well, I guess, kind of looking at the verbiage of that, how does that work? If it has toxic, each other creature you control with toxic gains toxic 1. So wouldn't they already have? I guess I need to read about that one, man. I'm new to the poison counters, and like I said, I've only been playing this game for a year now. I need to figure out what that means. Anyway, Elvish Champion, 1 green for a Lord, 2/2. So it's not an elf, it's a Lord. But it gives all your elves +1/+1 and has Forest Walk. So again, cheap body to buff up your elves, and that includes all elves, so not just yours, it would be other elves as well. We get +1/+1 and have Forest Walk. So going to be careful what you're playing against. If you're playing against another elf deck, maybe leave this one out. Heritage Druid for a 1/1 for a green elf druid. Tap 3 untapped elves you control to add 3 green. So again, it does not specify non-token elves. You can use those elves as, tap 3 of them. There's 3 green. Again, 3 average CMC of like 3.04 or something. But these mana dorks, there's 3 average mana cost is not a lot when you have this amount of the ability to be able to cast or to generate mana. Lisalana Huntmaster, 2 green for a 3/3 elf warrior. Whenever you play an elf spell, you may put a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token into play, so generate some elves. Leaf Crown Visionary, green for a 1/1 elf druid. Other elves you control get +1/+1. Also works as a draw engine. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you may pay a green. If you do, draw a card. There's no limitation to how many times you do that. So again, tokens will not work, but if you're casting elves, and there are some low mana cost elves in here, you can easily cast 2 or 3 elves in a turn. Pay the extra green, draw a card. Dionys Elvish Arch Druid for 3 and a green, a 3/3 legendary elf druid. Elves you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped during your turn, untap it and put a +1/+1 counter on it. This ability triggers only once each turn. So tap all your elves out for mana, untap them, put a +1/+1 counter on them. Let's say you have, Terra Symbiosis, so now you can draw some cards. You have, Token Doubler. Now you're doubling those +1/+1 counters. All right, Evolution Witness, 2 and a green for a 2/1 Elf Shaman Mutant. It has Adapt, so Adapt 2, you tap a 1 and a green. If this creature has no +1/+1 counters on it, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Evolution Witness, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So you could utilize this with your Dissident and, tap at the Blight 2, remove the +1/+1 counters, adapt it, put 2 more, then all of a sudden you can return target card from your graveyard, target permanent from your graveyard. Beast Whisper, 2 green for a 2/3 elf druid. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card, so a draw engine. Maha, it's Feathers Knight. So it's crazy. I got this card for like $18 or $15, like the week before everybody noticed the synergy and went bonkers. This card's worth like $50 now. It is a big body 6/5 legendary elemental bird with flying and trample. Ward to discard a card to target it. Creatures your opponents control have base toughness 1. Yeah, that's gross. Blight your opponent's creatures. Maha's on the board. Everything has 1 toughness on the other for your opponents. They die. Gaia's Herald, for 1 and a green for a 1/1 elf. Creature spells cannot be countered by spells or abilities. Elvish Mystic Manadork, Necrogen Rot Priest, 2 black and a green for a 1/5 Phyrexian Zombie Clerk with Toxic 2. Whenever a creature you control with Toxic deals combat damage to a player, that player gets an additional poison counter. Then it also, you can give target creature with Toxic Death Touch until end of turn. Priest of Tatiana, for 1 and a green for a 1/1 elf druid. Tap it for adding a green for each elf on the battlefield. Fauna Shaman, 1 and a green for a 2/2 elf shaman. Has a tap ability, tap a green and tap it to discard a creature card and search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand and shuffle. Joraga Warcaller, for a green 1/1 tap a green mana for an elf warrior. It has multi-kicker, so you can tap 1 and a green as many times as you wish to have it enter with a +1/+1 counter for each time it was kicked. And then other elf creatures you control get +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on it. So you can distribute more +1/+1 counters. And again, each of your elves will get +1/+1 for each counter on Joraga Warcaller. And lastly, Venerated Rot Priest, for a green for a 1/2 Phyrexian Druid with Toxic 1. Whenever a creature you control becomes a target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. So again, out there, your opponents start targeting your creatures, give them a poison counter. Then you can proliferate them. So that's my deck. Like I said, I think there's potential here for this to be a good build. Do I think it's the final build? No, I think in like 2 weeks you'll see me back on here building, rebuilding or making some tweaks in this deck. But if you're looking to start your adventure into Elf Ball, I think this is a pretty solid start. Again, is this a CEDH level deck? No, not at all. I never pretended to be, that level of play. But do I think it can beat up your friends in your pod on a Friday night? Yeah, I think it has the potential to work. So I'm going to give this puppy a try. Like I said, you'll probably see in a couple weeks, I'll be back on here posting kind of like I did with Nekusar. Hey, I went and pimped this deck out a little bit more, or I found some new synergies to add. So you'll probably see that eventually. But yeah, thank you for joining me today. Again, today's my birthday, so feel free to give me some love in the comments if anybody sees this video. But yeah, let me know what everybody thinks. Let me know kind of what your idea is, what your take on this elf, the high perfect Morcant will be. And yeah, let me know. But we'll catch y'all later. Thanks for watching. Bye.